Hey everyone, Dave Floss here with Prometheus Falling Toys and Mentally Unbalanced. And today we are going to take a look at the Revopoint 3D scanner. So stick around. So a couple months ago I did a video on the Creality Lizard 3D scanner. And I want to thank everybody for all of your great feedback and questions. Ultimately, my consensus at that time on that device was that it really didn't live up to the Einscan SP that I've been using for the last couple of years. Now, this did warrant quite a bit of feedback from various people. The first was the fact that I was not using the Creality Lizard exactly correctly. I missed a few things. I had a follow-up video to talk about what I missed. Unfortunately, even taking that into consideration, things like removing the object from the bed before during the pre-scan, the measurements of how close or far the scanner needed to be, ultimately, even upon making those corrections, did not change my overall view of the device. So I got some feedback saying, learn how to use it before you demo it. You're true. However, the core purpose of the video was how easy is it to use, right? So the Einscan might be considerably more expensive, right? MSRP about $2,300 versus the Creality Lizard, which is right now floating around. Oh, you can probably get one for $400 or $500 down from its MSRP of $800. So we knew, I figured there would be some trade-offs that even if it under the hood spec-wise had really similar specs, like its ability to get down to 0.05 millimeter accuracy, that there might be some trade-offs. And I think ultimately the trade-off was the overall quality of the scans and the software that accompanied it, making it, for me, extremely difficult to use. It wasn't an out-of-the-box, set it up, plug it in and go, right? Whereas the Einscan really is. Once you've set it up and done the first calibration, it's good to go. The software is straightforward. I don't have to make any fine-tuning adjustments. If you watch the video, I even got some feedback. There's this bar on the side that talks about the overall scan quality. It's this weird chart with like lines and whatever. And apparently I'm supposed to decode exactly right in there. So you know what? If you've had great experience with the Creality, I'm thrilled for you. After spending multiple hours reviewing the materials, looking at other videos online, I discovered two things. One, there wasn't much to go off of that really helped me fine-tune it to a point that it worked really well for me. And two, I have yet to see a single video where it has been able to get to small object quality. A lot of people have said, you're not using it right, that's why it doesn't work. But I've been looking. I've been looking for anyone who's been able to recreate the results or get good results out of very small objects, and I haven't found it. But one other piece of feedback that I got was people asking about the Revopoint 3D scanner. Now, this is another scanner that's right there in kind of that, depending on if you get it on sale, anywhere from $600 to $900. But similar, extremely small, portable, and also touts the ability to scan really small, fine objects with that 0.05 accuracy. So I thought, you know what? I know it can seem unfair to compare an $800 scanner to a $2,400 scanner. And ultimately, I felt that I was getting what I paid for at $800, which was a capable scanner with the Lizard, but not for me, not what I needed, not that idea of scan, quick fix, maybe a little bit of adjustment, and then print, right? I don't want to be spending a ton of time cleaning stuff up. So with that said, I wanted to take a look at a scanner that other people had been raving about, including for small objects. And with that, we're going to take a look at the Revopoint 3D scanner. So as usual, as we're looking at my desktop, I am in a Windows-based machine. The Revopoint will actually work on Windows or Mac. But for absolute consistency with my other videos, I'm using the exact same desktop that I use for my other scanner videos and for the scanning that I do on a regular day-to-day basis. This will give me the best true side-by-side comparison of how well the device works. So let's start with step number one, which is the software. The Revopoint scanner comes with its own software. And I think even before I get to software, let's take a look at the device so you can kind of see it in the other window I have here. The device, what impresses me the most is how small it is. It's smaller than a cell phone. It's very compact. It has a tripod, so it is not like the SP, which has an actual mount that it completely fits both the turntable and the scanner fit into. It is a tripod unit, has a separate turntable, which is a constant turning 360 degrees. So very, very similar, extremely similar to the Lizard as far as that setup. But really, I mean, when I first opened it, I thought, okay, I'm not going to get anything. Look how small this little scanner is. I'm really questioning how capable it's going to be. But let's get into the software, because the software is the first step of understanding. Once I've plugged in my USB and power, the software is going to give me an idea of what to kind of expect. So let's take a look at that. So here we have just installed the software. It's a very simple installation. Came on a USB flash drive. We're going to go ahead and launch the RevoScan software. We're going to close out its little learn message here. And we're going to go right into, you'll notice that right first thing we see here is it starts giving us a preview of the scanned object. And what I've seen with many 3D scanning software is that we get both the regular camera, where we can see the brightness aspect of it, and then the depth camera. And this is the one that you usually want to adjust. Now, I'm going to immediately call out the first thing I saw that really impressed me. So right here at the top, as opposed to a weird bar that says, hey, how close? Now remember, this is on a tripod. So I can move it back, I can move it forward, I can change the positioning. But look what happens. I take the item and I have it nice and centered on my turntable. And we see that the software is saying that it's at what it refers to as excellent as far as distance to object. If I move that object around, it immediately starts going into, I'm not sure. And then, of course, if I take it even further away now, it's telling me it's not even in the field of view. It's too far, too near, whatever the case may be. So let's go ahead. We'll just slide our turntable, center it right there on our screen, and maybe make just a little adjustment so you can get it back into that excellent range. We'll leave it there for just a moment. So the first thing is, right away when you launch it, device turns on, we get a preview window, and it's even telling us, hey, things are looking pretty good, or maybe not so good. Now we're also getting this kind of quick three-dimensional representation. You can see right now, it doesn't look like it's picking up much. And let's just put this in perspective. The item I'm scanning is smaller than a quarter. It is just this little skull. I love using this. It's got great surfacing. It's got great texture and depth. The coloring is perfect for trying to pick up scans, not a lot of reflective surfaces. This is like if you're going to scan a small object, this is my ultimate test. If you can scan this, it should come out really good, really well, because there's nothing else really going on that would prevent getting from a good scan. So we're going to replace that back on our turntable. Now, the other thing right now is it's kind of jumping between excellent and good, and ultimately that's because we have to adjust our depth camera. We can see it fine under regular lighting, and we have it just set to automatic. I'm going to go ahead and adjust. And the goal here is to make sure that as you slide this over, it's able to pick up more material, but you want as minimal red as possible. Red means it's too bright. The camera's going to capture. And you'll notice as I move that slider over, what do we immediately see in the center of our image? We see that the quality that it's picking up is already far superior. We're able to make out some of those details. So I'm going to try it at a 6. That looks really good, right? It's picking up everything, very little red. I should be able to get some really good quality out of that. And we're still kind of bouncing between excellent and good. I'm going to try just a little bit of maneuvering here. See if I can get that any better. I really want to give us the best possible. All right, so we're still at good. Now, here's the beauty of it. If you can see over here, we have the turntable. It's separate. We have the little scanner right here. I can try adjusting the scanner around a little bit. I'm going to leave it there for a second. And look at that. We're getting excellent. So this is telling me, the software saying, this is the best. This is good. No weird bars or charts to have to figure out. It's telling me that it's in a It should be in a primo spot. So now that we've used our preview to get everything aligned and pointed well, we're going to go ahead and move to scan. Now we get a quick scan pop-up. It's going to ask us, do you want to do a quick scan or high accuracy? I'm going for a tiny object, so I'm going to go for high accuracy. Do we want to scan markers, darkness, or features? This is just a standard object, so we're going to go features. I'm not looking at this from a 3D rendering, I should say 3D animation rendering perspective, so I'm going to go with no color. I just want the dimensions. I don't need the coloring, and we're not using any accessories. It's a standard turntable, not a dual axis. And we're going to hit OK. So this now takes us to the scan window. The only thing I noticed is that everything that I was looking at on one side has now moved to the other side. But it's really the same windows versus just the brightness, which I'll leave it automatic. Next, if we look down here, we have, again, the depth camera. For whatever reason, first little not thrilled about it is that I set the depth camera to a 6, but when I go to actually scan it, resets it. And I've noticed it happens every time. But I know that I want my value to be 6. So we'll scroll up to 7. Let's go back down to 6. You know what? I might actually be happier now with a 7. Yep, we're going to leave it at 7. And then it gives us the option to keep or remove the plane or the bed that it's on. And I'm going to tell you why. But first, I'm going to not remove the plane. And you'll notice immediately it's starting to pick up some of the features on the actual surface of the turntable itself. I'm going to tell you why I'm doing that in just a moment. Now, once we've gone through and made these settings, we see we're still in the excellent range. I'm going to go ahead on the right-hand side and hit play, which is how we start our scan. Now, unlike the SP, as I've said in my other videos, which actually moves in increments, it'll scan, turn, scan, turn, scan, and turn. Similar to the Lizard, this device also just has a constant 360-degree rotation. So it's constantly just turning and picking up data as it turns. And you can see it's filling in the model as we speak. So we're going to let it make sure at minimum we're doing one full rotation so we can get everything. Looks like I've gone all the way around. And I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. It's going to ask me if I like what I have or I want to restart. I'm going to go ahead and hit complete. It's going to fuse my information together, and we will see what we have. There, folks, I was looking at it before it was done fusing. Oops. So now let's take a look and see if we can get a sense of our item here. So already we can see there are some really good details. I'll try to zoom in here if I can. There we go. So we can see it captured a lot of the details. Let's look on the side. Really captured the details around the mouth. A little bit light on the teeth. It doesn't look like we've got quite the amount of teeth in there. Definitely got the eye sockets in the nose. Ultimately, this is a really decent quality scan. Now, it did pick up items from the bed. All little markers are coming up as objects. So if we were to, for sake of argument, to keep this scan, we'd have to delete that information. The other item that I like to look at is the mesh mix, right? Its ability to use software to fill in. This was something that I really struggled with on the Lizard. I think the SP does a great job because you can make multiple selections between watertight or not, and anywhere from low to very fine quality. And ultimately, many times it has filled in the little gaps where it couldn't scan, and boom, I was done. There's almost no cleanup necessary. So let's take a quick look at what our options are here. So again, we can do an auto or manual. We can set the amount of quality from very high to very low. We can activate denoise if we want. Right now we have it on auto, so it's not letting me change stuff. But if we switch to manual, I can go to the highest quality. I can say denoise it all the way up to 10. And let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So it's going to run the mesh. Okay, now let's zoom in again. And ultimately, because we had to do so much denoising, we did lose a little bit of the texturing around the teeth. But when you consider looking at the object that is only the size of a quarter, this little scanner did just one time around. We didn't even get anything from underneath. Did a really, really solid job. Like, I won't lie, I did not expect to get anywhere near this level of quality. And I was pretty impressed and mind blown that it was able to pull that together. Now, from here, we can go ahead and save our object. We can go back. We can add another round of scan because, of course, when we hit it, extrapolate and fill in, since we'd only scanned on one plane not the bottom. It just filled that in and flattened it out for us. We could, of course, go back and add more data if we wanted to get more details around. But this was just a quick test of how accurate of data is it going to pull. Now you're probably wondering, of course, why do I have all of these little, because I didn't remove the plane. And here's why. Here's why. We're going to go back. We're going to actually go back. We're going to go ahead and trash this scan. We're going to go back to here. We're going to, same exact object in the center. We're going to go ahead and scan, keep all of our settings the same. We're going to go here and again bump up our depth to 7 so we get those nice details. And now let's go ahead and remove the plane. And you'll see, ooh, it looks like it's doing a pretty good job. I don't see any of those other markers. But let's go ahead and hit scan and see what happens. So we can see again, it's filling in the data. It's occasionally picking up stuff on the bed, but it looks like it's able to extrapolate those out. Let's let it keep turning. Minimum, we want to go all the way around. And this is what I've noticed, is that as it turns, when it's trying to remove the bed, the software seems to struggle with removing the bed and still keeping the object centered. So what you'll see here is we'll go ahead and hit stop. And we'll go ahead and say, yep, go ahead and complete it. Let's wait for the fusing to complete. And then you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So you can see here right away, it's all over the map. I mean, it literally has stuff everywhere. Now, I'll be honest with you, this could be from any number of reasons. Maybe there's a lighting issue with the bed. I don't see anywhere in the software it's a very straight up basic software, which on one side is great because it's simple to use and kind of get going. I don't see a lot of ability to tweak. So there may be some things I need to tweak for when it's doing removing the plane or removing the bed so that it still stays consistent. Because right now it really doesn't understand where the object is in three-dimensional space because the bed or its attempt to remove the bed is throwing it all over the place. So a little bit of a trade-off is that from now, at least until I figure out, if I'm doing something wrong, removing the plane is not obviously having a very good effect on the output of my scan. That being said, if you think back to the first scan I did without removing the plane, really ultimately that's a 2-minute fix. Because once it's done, once I export it, yes, I'm going to have the skull and I'm going to have all these little dots, but all I need to do in my mesh mixer or even in my other software is highlight what I want to keep and have it blow out the rest. So, or reverse, highlight everything else, hit delete. That's all gone. I still have my main object. So ultimately, first gut reaction takes 5 minutes to set up, 5 minutes to install the software. I'm scanning and I'm getting pretty good results for this not $2,500 scanner. Now, the next thing I want to test though is I want to be able to, there's going to be 2 more tests ultimately. One is I want to do the same skull with 2 passes. I want to see how well the software can figure out the difference and merge these 2 items together to try to get more data, not just on one plane, but on a different plane as well. So let's do that next. So we'll go back. We're going to go ahead and hit scan. Again, we're going to bump up to a 7. We're going to not remove the plane. Now, this will be interesting because I'm curious to see if the plane, the fact that it's keeping the plane, is really going to throw it off if I try to do more than one scan. But let's just give it a chance and see what happens. So again, it's scanning and filling in the details, the data. It looks like it's picking up a lot of great data. By the way, you might have noticed I am not working under any kind of special lighting conditions. I haven't turned the lights low. I'm working in my office under some LED fluorescent lights. Regular lighting, and it's actually operating really well. Sometimes even the Einscan usually can have some issues when there's too much outside ambient light going on. But so far, the Revopoint seems to be doing really well. So we've made a full pass. I'll go ahead and hit, I'm going to start with pause. It's going to ask me if I want to undo. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop, and we're going to complete. Let's wait for this to fuse. And again, we have our 3D object. And again, it came out, I think, very well. Of course, we're missing all that data underneath. It's hollow. So now let's try doing a second pass. We're going to take our item. We're going to turn it sideways. And let's go ahead and do a second pass. Now, as we might expect, right now it's just scanning what it can see. It hasn't tried to fold the items on top or align them. It's just scanning. It's showing us what it previously scanned and what it's currently scanning without trying to use software to extrapolate and merge these two items together. So we're going to let this do a full pass around again. And once we feel pretty confident it's been able to fill in underneath, looks like it's really got all those underneath details, we'll hit stop and we're going to complete and try to fuse these. Let's see what it does. All right, so our fusing is complete and it does not look like it was able to align our object to each other. So what we will look to do is see if we can align our objects to each other. So I think maybe one of the challenges I have is that I told it to auto fuse and I'm not seeing the opportunity here to make a change. I wonder if I do, don't think doing mesh setting is going to help me. I think that's actually going to create an issue for me. So this is part of a learning curve on the software. It looks like maybe by having it auto mesh, I don't have the opportunity here to do an alignment. I will, just for the sake of argument, do an auto mesh. And I think what it's ultimately going to do is try to mesh the two items together, which is exactly what it did, into some weird The Thing grotesque. It's just, obviously, I don't know, that actually looks could be pretty cool, but not obviously what I was going for. So that ultimately didn't work. I'm going to go ahead and delete my scan data, and I'm going to go back. And real quick, we'll do a little fast forwarding here. Let's try that again the proper way. All right, so I've done my two passes again. Fast forward. Now, in this point, I am not going to auto fuse. I'm just going to hit complete. Now, I have the two different items, right? The two different scans side by side. Let's see what my options are when I do a manual one. I'm not sure what these values mean. So what I'm used to for example, the Einscan is I can ultimately take two different items that I've scanned on different planes. And if the software is not able to automatically combine them and layer them properly, there's a piece of software built into the Einscan that basically says, let me see item number one, item number two, and create connection points so that it knows how to lay those on top of each other. So in this particular software, those fuse settings look to be not as specific. I'm not sure, if I want a higher value. I mean, and again, I should look it up, but let's go ahead and just see what happens if we go with a really high value. Let's see, just out of curiosity, what that does. Sometimes the idea here is I like to learn as I go. Of course, at some point I might have to check and see what the software is capable of. Let's go ahead and see what it's able to come up with. Well, that did not work at all. I'm not even sure what that did. So what does that mean? Well, ultimately what it means is that out of the box, from a simplicity perspective, I'm going to have to do some research. It's not something where it's very straightforward how to take scans at different angles in the software that's provided and combine that. It might not even be really that possible to do that. It could also be a challenge that because I'm not removing the plane, that all of those other data points that it's picking up are actually throwing off the final results. So there's a little bit of potential work or research that needs to be done to see if and how well the Revopoint is able to do that when you're doing multiple scans. But that being said, what I am fairly impressed with is just the fact that it's picking up data, that it's getting that really small, fine object. And even worst case, if it really in the software can't take multiple scan angles and merge them together, because the quality is there, there's nothing stopping me from pulling those two different scans separately into a mesh mixer and using that to just quickly adjust and fold those two items together at the right proportions. So not quite as straightforward and easy and automatic as the Einscan, but not to the point where I'd say it's not capable of doing what I want it to do. There's just some additional steps that may be necessary, either tweaking what I'm doing now or using a third-party mesh mixer to make that happen. And that might be absolutely okay depending on where you want to invest in a 3D scanner. As long as the scanner can get good data and you can use a free mesh mixer and use that, and, and that's a good use of your time, then that's great because you're saving yourself, right? Over probably $1,500 for that one piece. Whereas the Lizard, ultimately, I didn't feel, even with a third-party mesh mixer or software, that I was going to be able to do that. It was not worth the amount of cleanup work. Was nowhere near. Here, a little bit of cleanup work and the initial scans that I had, I think would have worked really well. So we're going to do one more scan because ultimately the other thing I like to test is still small objects, but those that tend to be a little bit more complex. For example, I have this miniature of RoboCop 2. And ultimately, I don't expect to get good quality because there's a lot of black, dark color, and silver reflective surfaces. But if I really want to see how well the Revopoint does, let's go ahead and give it a shot and see what kind of quality it is, if any, able to get. So again, I will place it, and you will notice right away that we are getting an excellent, but I'm not seeing most of my items. So I am going to adjust my Revopoint. I'm going to be lifting it up on its tripod, still pointing it at the object. I've got to go a little further back. Let's try this. Now, again, what's great about this is it is telling me whether or not it's too far. Now, we're still at a 7. I think ultimately we're a little too far for this setup. Let's bring it in just a little bit. Now it's telling me good. Oh, we're starting to get some better data. Let's bring it a little closer. Pivot it down. Well, we're starting to get some data, which is really good. Let us take a look. Yeah, we can see that we're going to definitely have some challenges here. Even if I bump it up to a 10, full brightness, it's still having a lot of challenges because of that reflective surface, because of the darkness of that surface. You can really kind of see that here. Let's just try any other little fine tuning. Oh, now we're in the excellent range. Let me pivot this down just a little bit. All right, so this is telling me, all right, so it's telling me excellent. I'm at full. I mean, maybe I can get away with a 9. Let's go ahead and move to our scan. Same settings as before. We're going to go automatic on the brightness. We're going to bump this up to, I'm thinking starting at a 9. Getting a little bit of red. We're still getting a lot of blue, and that's really the problem, is that blue means it is not able to pull the data. If I go higher, try a little bit lower, I think 9 is where we're going to be. So here's what we're going to do. Like I said, this is the test that I don't expect great results, but let's go ahead and see how the Revopoint does. Let's go ahead and do a pass. Now, I think one thing important to remember right here is that unlike the Einscan, which will do one complete pass 360 degrees in various increments and then process the data, the Revopoint and the Lizard not only use that continuous, but you can let it keep going. You can get additional frames. It's not one pass and you have to stop. Now, on the Lizard, it made one pass and automatically stopped. I didn't find where that setting could be changed. What I've noticed on the Revopoint is that I can just let it keep going. It can make one pass. It's got a certain number of frames. You can let it make a second pass. Maybe it'll, and I think it's not about it's going to get a ton more information, but it might be able to, fill in a little bit more. So we've made about 1.5 passes. I'm going to let it do 2 full passes, maybe about 900 frames. And let's go ahead and hit stop. This time I'll let it do the fuse because I'm not going to try alternate angles. Let's do a complete, and let's see how it turned out. All right, our fusing is complete. Let's take a look. As I expected, it had a real challenging time getting a lot of those details. However, I'm very impressed that a scanner of this size and price range actually captured as much detail as it did. Now, I can't even use my Einscan really to get a full one-time 360-degree scan of this particular item. I would have to either code it or use other tools to make the scanning, the surface better for scanning. But again, out of the box, just you saw the adjustments were very minimal, slightly moving it back and forth, a little bit higher, not anything crazy. The software gave me a good idea of what my best possible angle and approach was, and ultimately the fact that it captured even as much detail as it did is very impressive for a scanner of this price. So let's go ahead and do one more scan. All right, so I have one more test that I want to do, and it's really the test that is most specific to my use case. What I'm usually using my scanner to do is to scan items to make replacement or repair parts, or scan them so I can do them in different scales on my 3D printer. So what I have here is just this pretty rudimentary toy, this G.I. Joe toy. What I'm going to do is scan this, because ultimately, if I can get decent quality out of this scan, the ability to scan it and then use it to produce a 3D replica, then I could really say that the Revopoint does a pretty top-notch job. So let's go ahead and see how that turns out. All right, our fusing is complete. Let's take a look. Well, ultimately, it looks really, really solid. Obviously, if you wanted to get the details of the front side or the underside, we'd have to do a second pass. But ultimately, the areas that it could scan, it looks like it got some pretty good quality. A little bit mushy, maybe there on the back. Let's go ahead and mesh this together and see how the meshing turns out. So as I expected, it didn't know what to do on the bottom, so it just created a glob. That's not terrible. I can easily just slice that off in my mesh mixer. And again, this was just attempting to do one pass. I knew I was going to lose quality in the areas that it couldn't see very well. But if you look at the areas it could see, and we compare that to the original object, it really did a pretty impressive job, right? Just one quick pass of this object. So now, to kind of give you a side-by-side flavor, let's go ahead and take a look at this in a mesh mixer. We're going to go ahead and save this file, and we're going to save it as an STL. We'll go ahead and save it to, it's putting it in RevoScan. I'm going to put it in my preferred folder. Go ahead and hit save. All right, so what I have here is a side-by-side of the scan I just did in Mesh Mixer compared to the same exact object scanned in the Einscan SP. And ultimately what I'm going for is, first of all, the Einscan, which we have here on the right side of my screen, was 2 passes. It was a one pass, and then I turned it 90 degrees and was able to splice that together. So we're not going to be able to do a fair comparison of the underside versus the underside, because I wasn't able to do, or haven't figured out yet, how to properly do 2 passes, at least within the Revopoint software. So that's not what I'm going for here. What I am looking at, though, is as we look at the quality of the details that it was able to capture, as we look at the side, definitely that top portion, and kind of this front side, I'm admittedly impressed. When you're talking about some of the finer details, let's look at on the side here, the details of the antenna. We can see the details here, and you know what? But as we kind of take a look at the details that it was able to capture around the top, and compare them, right? We see on the Einscan, we did get some of those details of the grading work. We can see some of the lines in the side area, but you know what? While didn't quite get the same level of depth in those 2 areas, I have to say that, if you think, one of them is a $800 scanner, the other one is a $2,400 scanner. Wow, I'm impressed. And I don't say that loosely, because I went into this with kind of low expectations. When I got the Lizard, I went in with very high expectations and ultimately felt pretty disappointed. And I was never able to get this level of quality out of the Lizard for these smaller objects. And yes, perhaps based on feedback, I could have spent more time and dialed everything in. But I don't want to be spending my time doing that. For me, it's a business, not just a hobby. So the more time I'm spending having to fix things is more time I'm losing on working on the things I want to be working on. So I'm like kind of pleasantly surprised that the Revopoint ultimately delivered some incredible quality at this particular price, to the point where, yes, trying to figure out doing two scans and merge them together, I wasn't able to do right away. Um, and definitely the idea that the bed, when I was trying to have it auto remove the bed, the plate, it seemed to struggle with that. But its quality is good enough that I'm willing to either invest and learn what I could do differently in the software that's provided to get better quality, or understand what I can do from an output perspective and quickly be able to do some mesh mixing. Is the Revopoint going to replace my Einscan? Well, no, I already have the Einscan. So of course I'm going to use the device that gives me the absolute best quality and ease of use and output. However, the purpose of this video was more, can you get a great level of quality out of the RevoScan? And I would say the answer is an absolute yes. So if you're looking at getting into 3D scanning and doing different parts, similar to what I've been talking about, the smaller, medium objects, small with really fine details, but you don't necessarily want to invest, especially as a hobby, $2,400 just to start making some of these parts. Is the RevoScan a very viable alternative? Absolutely yes. I could not say that about the Lizard. And yeah, I not to beat this particular horse to death, but a big factor for when I got into scanning, and I think for who my intended audience is, are people that are looking to get into it, maybe hobbyists of various levels. And the question is, I don't want to have a degree in 3D CAD and scanning to be able to use a device, right? I want to be able to kind of plug, play, and go. And the Revopoint has impressed me in its ability to be quickly set up, straightforward software. In fact, the software is the only area where I'll say I have to give it a notch down. I wish the software did a little bit more, or was a little, had some more options that were, help me understand what they're used for. I'm gonna have to research that, which is fine. But ultimately, to be able to get this level of quality, if you're looking at getting into 3D scanning, you want something that can do the types of objects that I've been talking about in a number of my videos. I think you will be well served with the Revopoint as a starting point, and only truly if you reach the next level and want to make an investment to something that's even a little bit more powerful, more capable, and ultimately even less after post-production work, then you might look at the Einscan. But I can't say I'm anything but impressed with the Revopoint at this point. So there you have it, the Revopoint 3D scanner, which again, for its price, for what it does, I think is excellent. Now you can look at our other videos and kind of see where we were challenged with the Lizard, where we've had great success with the Einscan, and between those videos and this one, get a real good flavor. But I will say in summary that the Revopoint really impressed us out of the box with its simplicity of use. Now, one thing we have never done across any of our scanning devices is larger objects or free floating. The idea of not having the scanner on a fixed surface, more handheld and holding it around. Ultimately, because that's not what we wanted it for. That's not what we use it for. And there are other videos on YouTube that look at a variety of these different scanners for those types of situations. But for what we were trying to do and have been doing for some time with the Einscan, the Revopoint really, really ultimately impressed. And I would say that while I may not be using it as frequently as the Einscan, especially if I want to go and do scanning of parts from a portability perspective, there is no beating the fact that the entire RevoScan setup fits in this container, right? Other than the spinning the bed, the little motorized bed, the scanner, the tripod, all the cables fit in this really amazing. I mean, this container is smaller than just the Einscan device or the Lizard device, and that in itself, I think, is really impressive when you see the types of results that you're able to get out of it. So what do you think? Is the Revopoint everything I'm saying it's cracked up to be? Have you had different experiences, good, bad, or indifferent? Go ahead and leave some comments. We love to hear your feedback. And of course, we welcome you to please subscribe so that you can see this and other videos as we post them. Until then, I'm Dave Floss with Prometheus Falling Toys and Mentally Unbalanced, thanking you for your time and hoping you have a great day.